Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this Global Investigative Journalism Network webinar, which is about gathering evidence and documents in conflict and war zones, a MENA case study. My name is Alia Ibrahim. I am the CEO and co-founder of Daraj, an independent digital media based in Beirut. Journalists working in the Middle East and North Africa are often on the front lines of unfolding tragedies. From Gaza and Sudan to Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, in these conflict and post-conflict settings, reporters are among the first to encounter potential evidence of war crimes. Their work can go beyond bearing witness and informing the public. It can contribute to accountability efforts and legal processes. But doing so responsibly requires specific skills and deep understanding of how to collect, verify, preserve, and store sensitive material. In today's webinar, we will explore how investigative journalists can document human rights abuses in war zone with a focus on methods to ensure the information gathered can later be used by legal investigators or international courts. Drawing from their on-the-ground experience in Syria, Iraq, and Palestine, our expert panel will share practical tools, ethical consideration, and field-tested techniques for recording testimony, analyzing open source material, and archiving evidence in a secure and legally sound manner. I'm delighted to introduce today's speakers. Raji Abdessalam is a legal data archive analyst with deep expertise in documenting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and attempted genocides in Syria and Iraq. His forensic review of hundreds of testimonies has supported prosecutions of Syrian war criminals in courts across Europe. Currently chief legal data archivist with the Reckoning Project, Raji specializes in tracking the provenance of evidence, verifying witness statements, and conducting legal-oriented analyses of human rights violations. Layla Al-Aryan is a journalist and senior producer for Al Jazeera English in Washington, D.C. She is co-author with Chris Hedges of Collateral Damage, America's War Against Iraqi Civilians, and based on their Nation magazine investigation, The Other War, which was selected as one of Project Censored's most important underreported stories of 2008. Al-Aryan's work has appeared in The Guardian, The Independent, The Nation, and other major outlets, and she holds a master's degree from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. Hadi Al-Khatib is the founder and director of the Syrian Archive and co-founder of Mnemonic, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving and verifying open source documentation of human rights abuses in conflict zones. Through his work, Al-Khatib has helped build bridges between journalists, legal professionals, and civil society organizations to strengthen the use of digital evidence in accountability processes. Before we start, a little bit of information about the Global Investigative Journalism Network, for those of you who are not familiar with it. GIJN is the largest global network of nonprofit investigative journalism organizations with 251 member organizations in 95 countries, but it works with journalists everywhere, in nonprofits, in commercial organizations, and with freelancers. It has an extensive range of resources and tip sheets to help journalists worldwide, which you can check on GIJN.org. For this webinar, I would also like to remind our audience we have live interpretation from English to Arabic and French and back. So if you would like to use these services, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select the language you prefer. We also would like to hear from you, so please send your written questions and messages in the Q&A box, and you will get as many as we can, depending on how much time we have left. Also, please note that this session will be recorded and will be later posted on YouTube. So let's start. Leila, I would like to start with you. Documenting war crimes in Gaza with access must making it so difficult. How do you go around that? How can you work? How important is it to depend on local journalists, and how capable are they of doing it? How are you managing?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the organizers, to GIJN, for everybody who took time to attend today. I wanted to first start by just situating ourselves in terms of the genocide in Gaza, which has been escalating. We're not talking about history. We're not talking about past events. The genocide is getting worse with each day. Starvation is taking hold all over Gaza. Just today, as I was thinking about my comments for this session, I was getting voice notes from a local journalist we've worked with in Gaza telling me people are running out of food to eat, that bags of flour that have gone bad are being sold for $300 on the streets, that people are taking dried macaroni, grinding it up and making it, baking it. So the desperation really is growing, and it's important to really situate ourselves in the context of what's happening. I did want to share my screen with you all to show you some information, to share some. Don't think I have these permissions. Someone can. Oh, there we go. Apologies for that. Okay. So I'm the executive producer of Fault Lines, which is a documentary program on Al Jazeera English. And in the past year, we've worked on 4 documentaries out of Gaza. The Night Won't End, which looks at the killing of civilians in Gaza by the Israeli military. Starving Gaza, which looks at Israel's starvation policy. All That Remains, which is the story of a 13-year-old girl named GIJN, who came to the US for treatment after losing her leg in an Israeli attack. And Kids Under Fire, an investigation into reports that the Israeli military is targeting, shooting, and killing Palestinian children and wounding them, primarily based on the testimony of doctors from the US who went to Gaza, who witnessed a pattern as they were working there. Now, we could not have done any of these 4 films without journalists on the ground that we worked with. And that's because, as you mentioned, Gaza has been sealed off, has been completely sealed off from international journalists, with the exception of people who've gone on embeds with the Israeli military. But otherwise, no journalist can enter independently and report independently. And that's because the Israeli military has blocked that access. So our reporting approach in Gaza is, as I've mentioned, we work with journalists and filmmakers on the ground. And I should take a minute to say here just how risky it is to be a journalist on the ground in Gaza. More than 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli military, blowing all of the previous records out of the water. It's an unprecedented situation. So of course, with that comes safety concerns. You can't really ever ensure anyone's safety in Gaza. Everyone is at risk. There are no safe zones. In fact, it's so risky to be a journalist that journalists have even noticed that people that they want to interview now don't want to be seen with journalists who are identified as journalists wearing flak vests, wearing helmets, because it's widely known that journalists are at increased risk. So as we're working with these journalists and filmmakers, I should mention, we've worked with many journalists, but the primary partner of ours is called Mediatown in Gaza. It's a production company that has been around for 20 years, has reported all over the world, but primarily making films in Gaza. So we discuss reporting techniques, how to send the material. And this is a really key point to talk about. We know that anything coming out of Gaza or on this topic is under, let's just say, extra scrutiny more than other issues. So we needed to be 100% sure that the reporting is bulletproof and unimpeachable. So we were in conversation the entire time about the approach, the reporting approach, how to gather facts and evidence, how to interview eyewitnesses, and to cross-verify content with third-party sources such as previous reporting, social media eyewitnesses. And of course, we had to gather every possible piece of evidence. So I'll tell you a bit. I'll use The Night Won't End, our feature-length film, which came out in June 2024. So it's been nearly a year, to talk a little bit about a case study of how we gathered every possible piece of evidence. So of course, what are the types of evidence? You have physical evidence, documents, weapons fragments, depending on the story, clothing. There's digital evidence, cell phone video, social media posts, text messages, satellite images, which not everybody has access to, but there's specific companies that provide those. Visual evidence like photos, traditional news footage, as opposed to social media, and then testimonial, so eyewitness accounts. So, and then the sources of documentation, again, working with local journalists and media outlets, or cross-checking your reporting with other international media outlets, NGOs and human rights groups, again, using satellite imagery and drone footage. In our specific investigation, we partnered with open source investigators like Forensic Architecture, Air Wars, and Al Jazeera's open source unit, Sanad. And of course, depending on the story you're doing, working with local civilians and experts, doctors, human rights investigators. So before I get into the ethical considerations, I wanted to talk, like I said, a little bit about some of the specific attacks that we documented and investigated. And the night won't end. We knew that airstrikes were a really, common way that people were being killed. It was by far more civilians, more people have been killed in airstrikes than in any other way. So we decided to investigate a specific airstrike that happened on December 11th, 2023 in Gaza City. And it involved a family called the Salim family. In that massive airstrike, more than 100 people, members of the same family, were killed, including 50 children. So we were really able to reconstruct that attack by using footage from Al Jazeera, our colleagues on the ground, and actually in every single one of the attacks we investigated, having that news footage where Al Jazeera's cameras were there the next day filming, gathering testimony, getting that immediate eyewitness testimony was so key, which shows you that even when you're doing documentary work, the work of journalists who are responding immediately, covering breaking news is so crucial. So in that attack, we worked with Air Wars to very carefully list every single person that was killed, determine how that attack compares to other attacks. Unfortunately, they said it was quite common to have attacks of that size in Gaza, as well as quantify the number of children killed. And then we also had our team on the ground interview the Salim family that survived that attack, members of the Salim family, to talk about what it's like going through surviving airstrikes, what it's like losing loved ones in airstrikes. So it's a combination of using the footage that was immediately taken at the scene, testimonial interviews by survivors, as well as working with Air Wars to get more details on comparatively on the numbers and how it compares to in general to other attacks and other conflicts. So they said that this far exceeds US air campaigns in places like Mosul, etc., Raqqa, etc. So the other attack that we investigated is, of course, a very famous one, the attack on Hind Rajab and her family. Similarly, our team gathered all of the news coverage, all of the footage from the scene, interviews with Hind Rajab's mother. That was the most extensive interview she's ever done. And then we also worked with forensic architecture to reconstruct, based on footage from the scene, as well as additional interviews that our team conducted, including with some of the paramedics that showed up after the scene, with the first responders who were on the phone with Hind and her family, of course, with those famous recordings that we've all heard with Hind and the Palestine Red Crescent Society, to reconstruct the attack. And forensic architecture and our team was able to show that the car was shot at 335 times, or there were at least 335 bullet holes. They were also able to situate, again, based on open source data and some of the footage that was taken, where the car was, where the likely position of the Israeli tank was, and the fact that most likely the person in the tank could see Hind and her family based on their positionality and based on the type of tank that it was, which is a Merkava tank, which are usually fitted with scopes. So it's really, really important in order for the world to care about what's happening in Gaza, to be able to kind of combine this on-the-ground storytelling that's really intimate, that gets you into the heart of these families and what they're going through, as well as very rigorous, bulletproof investigative journalism. I think that combination of those two styles of journalism is really compelling, is undeniable, and is important to kind of set the agenda. Now, I don't have a lot of time, but it's I'd be remiss to not talk about some of the ethical considerations involved in doing this kind of work. Of course, informed consent, communicating with the people that you're interviewing about what it means to appear in your story, what potential risks they could be facing, and to make sure that you don't put them at risk. Also, avoiding re-traumatization. So one of the horrifying attacks that we cover in The Night Won't End is an execution of 11 men in front of their wives and children on December 19th, 2023. It was a horrifying experience in which Israeli ground troops came to the same Salem family that I mentioned, to their doorstep as they were seeking shelter in a building with relatives and other families. They took the women and children, separated them from the men, and then proceeded to beat them, torture them, humiliate them. They took the father of the family and husband of the family that we focused on, broke his jaw, punched him. Eventually, they had the women and children in a position where they could watch as they executed the men. Our colleagues at Al Jazeera Sanad had already interviewed the survivors of that execution who were members of the Salem family. So we wanted to avoid re-traumatizing them. We made a decision very early on. They've already given their testimony. We're not going to re-traumatize them. We're going to use that footage, and then we're going to get additional testimony of that attack from other witnesses and other survivors to bolster the reporting that's already been done. We also obtained contemporaneous WhatsApp messages right after the execution. In order to bolster the reporting, we obtained satellite images that show that Israeli troops were indeed in that area on that day, in that, in the area where the execution took place. We also took Al Jazeera footage from the following day that were, again, very breaking news interviews, immediate in the aftermath interviews with the survivors. So we had both breaking news footage as well as proper sit-down interviews. Of course, it's important to avoid tropes, stereotypes, exploitation, sensationalism when telling these stories. We obtained 2 different videos showing the bodies of the men after the execution. We blurred those bodies, but we thought it was important to show that there is evidence that this did happen, especially given some of the denialism that happens with these stories. Why does this work matter? You mentioned in your introduction, informing the public to stop these atrocities from happening, setting the news agenda. As things are getting worse in Gaza, the news coverage is dropping, making sure that people cannot turn away. Accountability and enabling legal justice. I know that Hadi and Raji are both going to speak much more about chain of custody and the importance of preserving evidence that can actually go to court. And of course, documenting and preserving history. Thank you so much. I know I've gone over my time already.
Thank you so much, Leila. I hope we'll have the time to go back. One question that I find incredibly important, and we can, because we work with our correspondent in Gaza, dealing with the mental health issues, giving directions to the journalists on the ground when they're also most of the time dealing with their own personal story unfolding in front of their eyes, and in a lot of cases involving a lot of violence. It must be very difficult. I hope we'll be able to get back to that. I want to move to Hadi. Wars and violence, it's never easy, but the challenges are completely different in the case of Syria. Geography is much bigger. The amount of information, the access to, and the quality of the information is also very different. I think prioritizing and team building and making sure there's no overlapping among priorities could become big challenges on your side. Can you please walk us through how you make your work as efficient as possible, and what kind of strategies do you follow?
Thank you so much, Alia, and thank you for the GIJN network for the invitation to this webinar and for being with you all. When we started 10 years ago with founding the Syrian Archive, it was to build on what the journalists in Syria have been doing and what citizens in Syria have been risking their life to do, which is documenting human rights violations and showing the world about the violence that they are experiencing in their homes. We wanted to take another step towards making sure not just we raise awareness about what happened, but also to use these materials that journalists are risking their life, documenters are risking their life to capture in legal proceedings, in accountability processes. That was the main objective of why we started the Syrian archive. And the mass amount of information was really challenging for us because, as you mentioned, Alia, it's a bigger geographic area and there has been millions of records that's been documented, published online or not published online that was really all important to consider. And why I say that, because right now we receive requests from accountability mechanisms about incidents happened 10 years ago. Imagine 10 years ago, I really been doing this work for a long time. I don't remember what happened 10 years ago at a specific date, location, and time. It's really hard. And even with witness testimonies, it's very difficult for them to remember. And then obviously there's also the issues that Leila mentioned about making interviews with witnesses multiple times, which can be really difficult for them. So we also decided with the Syrian archive to focus on only one aspect of documentation, which is open sources, and make sure that we only use this aspect when it comes to after archiving to corroborate witness testimonies, to answer requests by accountability mechanisms when they ask us, what do you know about this incident from 10 years ago? Then we are able to give them videos, open source videos and footage about that incident, corroborating witness testimonies and other evidence that they have, and making sure that these videos are available even if social media platforms like YouTube in that case, or others like X, formerly Twitter and Facebook, have removed these posts. So this is really important, and we are really happy to be arriving into that stage, to have the technical infrastructure in place in order to do this work, not just in Syria, but in other countries. So I'll start with a very quick presentation, and please stop me at any point if I take more time, but just to introduce you a little bit about the workflow, how we do this work. So we created the organization called Mnemonic, which is a nonprofit based in Berlin. And with the Mnemonics team, we built open source information archives. The one that started in Syria, for example, 10 years ago was the founding archive. And we make sure that we facilitate evidence-based outcomes that can be used for criminal investigation, also investigative journalism, and to also build memory. We've done this work in Syria, and right now we're doing it in multiple countries, including Yemen, Sudan, Ukraine, Palestine, Belarus, and Iran, and other countries too. And this is the main workflow of what we do. It really starts from making sure first that we identify the people, journalists, documenters, civil society organizations that are already doing the work of documentation, and reach out to them to make sure that we are preserving the content in the best way possible, with their agreement, with their content, with their consent about how they want it to be used and in which context. And the second part of that is to make sure, second is to build the team within the organization that have the skills to work with this information. What I mean by work on it, to organize it, to make sure that it's archived and collected properly, and make sure it's verified properly. And these skills are really important. These skills are really needed to verify and make sure that this verification is valid and with a very strong methodology. So building the team, building skills is really important for us as a first step. The second one that we focused on is also building the tools, building the technical infrastructure. This is a very big technical operation, how to organize all of this information to make sure that we tell the story in the best way possible and to make sure that we submit investigations in the best way possible. So we work on building the infrastructure. These are the archiving tools that I'll go through. The third thing that we worked a lot on is building the methodology, building the research workflow, building the policies and the procedures to organize our work. Without that, it will be really difficult to do this work systematically. Well-documented research handbook has been created, meeting international standards such as the Berkeley Protocol of conducting open source investigations. We've been working 10 years to build the technical tools, which is the tool to archive information from different social media platforms, meeting legal standards, and building the second tool, which is a software to make sure that this archive that we've collected is accessible, not just by us, but by us and all the partners, to be able to access it, tag information, verify it, and analyze it there, and organize this information to make sure that we have library of incidents, thematic issues, systematic attacks, also linking perpetrators and actors to specific incidents and types of violations. All these have been really essential for our work, and we've learned the importance of them also during the legal procedure. For example, in a lot of cases, when we are working on a legal procedure, we're always asked who was responsible for this violation. And if it's a specific military unit, what do you know about this military unit? What do you know about their chain of command and about their structure? And there's a lot out there when it comes to open source information that you can use after verification to reconstruct this chain of command and corroborate it with other types of evidence. So this is what we have been working on. So far, we've archived over 6,500,000 materials records in the Syrian context from 2011, around 1 million records when it comes to Sudan since 2019, over 10 million when it comes to Yemen since 2016. And we make sure that these internal tools at Mnemonic is also available for partners, with partners. So for us to really collaborate together on the archiving process, on the organizing the information process, and on the verification process, because as you said, Ali, at the beginning, it's mass amount of information. How can we do this work? It's really difficult to be done by one organization. It absolutely needs collaboration. And this is what we really need to make sure of, is developing the technical infrastructure, the protocols and workflows to collaborate together. And this is really important also in this really difficult situation, also when it comes to funding for all of us. There are also some external tools that we use for web archiving that are not developed at Mnemonic, but developed at other organizations and partners. Really good tools that we have also been using and integrating with our system. One of them is Web Recorder, which can be used to archive websites and social media content as well. And also it can be used to automate the archiving of multiple pages on the internet. So this can be really helpful and really easy to use. One of the tools that we recommend. And the other one is called Auto Archiver by Bellingcat, which is also an open source tool that have a community behind it to develop and sustain this tool. So these are a couple of tools that we recommend for archiving. When we do the archiving and verification, we do it for a specific purpose. And that purpose is to create an outcome out of it, whether it's an article published online, but when it comes to the legal context, it can be a search results that can be shared with prosecution authorities. It can be a tagged data sets, for example, attacks on specific protected objects like hospitals or schools, because with that, you are really able to expose certain things like intent, for example, after tagging multiple records from multiple sources. Another thing that can be also shared is the areas of operation and chain of command of certain groups, incident reports and verification reports of specific media, or the evidence, the video files themselves. All these can be shared and welcome to be shared with the accountability mechanisms. And this is the output that we make sure that we share with accountability mechanisms after the process of archiving and verification and investigation and so on. And we share this information with international accountability mechanisms, as mentioned to you, with domestic prosecution authorities, and also with human rights and advocacy organizations, whether it's local or international, but also with the war crime units in Europe. Last example, and if I take a little bit, maybe more time, but just to share that in the context of our work on Iran, this work was about 2 requests that we get related to investigations needs to be shared with for the justice work, for our accountability work. It was really difficult to search through 2 million records. We organize data, as I mentioned to you, manually and automatically. And manually, it happens through collaboration with many partners. And in Iran, they collaborated with over 70 researchers on the platform to organize this information. This is really important. The second part is organizing information through machine learning. This is also a new possibility, how to identify objects automatically, such as cluster munitions in Syria. This is really important in a context where cluster munitions are still some of them are still there, and families who are returning homes, unfortunately, are being injured or killed because these munitions are there. So identifying them automatically, geolocating them, making sure that we do this as fast as possible using machine learning is really important. Because when using a software that is trained to find this information automatically, you're able to create a specific database that you can go through, not needing the manual work at the beginning, but of course, manual work is always needed. And the last thing is the use of also machine learning to transcribe content. This is what we have done in the context of Sudan and Ukraine as well, to make sure that, again, this information is contributing to a specific output, because in the end, we're not archiving for the case of archiving or for the case of only documentation, but we are archiving for the case of sustainable peace and for the case of pursuing justice and accountability in our countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Sorry
so much, Hadi. And I hope we will have the time to go back and ask you some questions. I'm very curious about collaborations and how smoothly they can happen, and also how things may be different now after the fall of the regime in Syria. But before we go too far, I want to take it to Raji. Raji, through the filmmaking and documentary filmmaking specifically, and investigative journalism, and the work that Hadi and his team and other working on archiving are doing and documenting are doing. The transitional justice course is really too long. Where you see things, what's the process? What's the process and how? What's the North Star, if you want? What keeps teams like you see the value of the work and see where it's going?
Actually, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Layla, and the GIJN to be part of this webinar. And Alia, it's very important to understand how everything is dynamic. Like, to build a legal case, you will never be able to build it alone with the supportive evidence and open source, and it will be very difficult to build the case only with the witnesses. You need both. And I can give a direct example, and here is a shout out for my mentor, Anwar al-Bunni, that he cooperated in the last case, and this is one of the last sentences we have against a criminal that he did a crime in Syria, the butcher of Yarmouk camp, Muwaffaq Dawa. And fun facts, actually, Hadi organization gave a big evidence, supportive evidence about this specific case, by the way. So also we have to, we say name and shout out the people who worked so hard for 2 years to be able to build that case. And this is something, can give you an example. The first thing that we heard about that specific guy, Muwaffaq Dawa, and now we can say his name because there's an aggravated life sentence against him in the Amtsgericht, like the court in Berlin. So it is safe to mention the name. So what happened in that specific case, for example, we heard about his crimes through a YouTuber called Abu Tala. And he was talking about this guy, I saw him in Berlin, in Zollen-Allée Street, and he's walking with bodyguard, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. And basically, he signaled the guy for us. And then we started to see, is this true? So we did the first step that called the incident mapping. And incident mapping, we deal with it as an incident. We don't know if it happens or didn't happen. We don't know if it's an infringe, human rights violation, war crime, or maybe this guy did series of crime that have this systematic and widespread, and it's then a part of crime against humanity, you know? Or maybe he jeopardized the life of people in a way that they cannot recover anymore, and then it would be concerned of a bigger crime. So what happened is the team started to work on the ground. Amazing people, very beautiful, hardworking people. And they started to collect the testimonies. And they started to see what kind of documentation that is done about that guy. And that guy, like, he did crazy stuff. Like, he was bragging about what he did. He changed a mosque for his own personal jail. He did crazy stuff. You can review it review the whole story in the Syrian Center for Legal Studies and Research. They wrote also an article about what this specific guy did in Syria. And we collected all these things. So the first something you will receive is a crazy amount of data. And I'm only talking about money, like the manual collected narrative from people. That is, I cannot say they are even testimonies. I didn't go to the open source still. And you will say, people say very contradicting things. People would say something that is, you know, people forget, they remember, they talk to each other, biasing. So you have to collect everything correctly. And this is in the methodology, we call it the CCC, the correct, concrete, coherent. After you listen to all these testimonies, you change them from storytelling to fact-based stories. And then you reach the concrete. And from the concrete, here you have to run the coherency. The coherency, you bring every verified document you have and open source investigation that other people did. And here, again, I have to shout out for Hadi. He played a big role, his team in that. And then what happened is you start to compare and make sure that, is this story coherent? Is there a coherency in all of this? And then you start to build the argument. The argument is, this guy killed people. He did it in a vengeful spirit. He was a part of a machination that put all the people in Yarmouk camp under starvation and hunger. He did all this list of things. And then the team will go back to find the exact questions that the legal team will be asking about what kind of crime should they focus on, because the guy did so many crimes. So the easiest one was the direct torture and killing that he did for normal people that were standing on a line waiting for the distribution of food, you know. And you can see that the legal team say, okay, we will focus on that. Please go and ask 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they created what they call the criminal complaint. And this was communicated to the prosecutor, because prosecutors, and this is a case under universal jurisdiction. It's not under international criminal law. That is a totally different story, and how we use evidence and admissibility in court. So what happened is, in that small example, he asked us, okay, you convinced me, send me the actual witnesses. And then we have to make sure everything we have is scalable and is repeatable. That means the witnesses that we interviewed has to be mentally and physically fit and unbiased. And this is something, it's very important. When you are collecting a document, there is a legal standard, like a Brackley. I've seen Hadi mentioned so many things when it comes to open source. And when it comes to human-based testimony, there's also a long list of things that we have to meet. One of them is the mental integrity and physical fitness. They have to be mentally and physically fit, because when they tell you the story, they have to go back and tell the same story. So if we re-traumatize them, if they are traumatized, if they are physically injured, tired, they are not unwilling to do that. And here also, you have to make sure that these are met as the first one. And the second thing is the do no harm. Many of the witnesses in the conflict, they have families that could be endangered. They can be themselves endangered. And there's many examples from Copland's trials when many witnesses got intimidated through their families in Syria, for example. We've seen the same thing in the Al-Amiri in Iraq, when the questioning about what happened and the American army bombarding a big shelter. 81 families were the civilian families were in that shelter. And people were like asking, then there was like some kind of intimidation. So risk management is very important. And the way that you address it, then you have to be honest. And when they are open to do that, then we go for the consent letter, because someone has to agree on this, and also to start something there called the chain of custody on evidence, because the testimony itself, regardless of the existence of the witness, it starts to be an admissible document in court that we have to do. And again, the prosecutor would never go for it. He would say, I need to see the actual witness. Please send him to the police. In limited jurisdiction, they have like different conditions. And this is like very, very quick example about how all these things played together to build a case. I'm gonna go for my PowerPoint. I hope I still have some time. I'm so excited to be with colleagues that usually I'm the guy on the back end, you know, and behind the computer who does not meet an amazing people like Layla, like Hadi in person. We meet very, very, very rare.
You have a few minutes, Raji, because we want to take some questions later from our audience. So go ahead with the slides.
Okay, then I will go for 2 quick slides then.
Okay.
Basically, I already talked about our approach, how you have to combine everything you have, from actual testimony to the supportive evidence. That could be videos, that could be a document, that could be an actual physical evidence in case of injury or ammunition. We talked about the CCC. We talked about the correctness of evidence. We talked about the correct, okay, Mani, we talked about, Osint, Hadi talked about, so I'm gonna stop.
I have a very quick follow-up question here, Raji. Every freelancer who has access to information is equipped and knows how to get in touch with you, like to make sure that you get information that you can eventually use. Do you think freelancers, journalists on the ground are aware of the importance, and to what extent? How much information you use that could have been brought
Basically,
to you in better shape?
there is something that is very difficult when you want to go, because there are so many different types of courts. Journalists, they use the most important courts, in my opinion, that is the public opinion courts, that is naming and shaming. And this is one of the most powerful one, because sometimes to go to litigation, it's so difficult and takes so much time. And it sometimes takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So the best one is to make sure that when you collect an information, the most important thing is to do no harm. And do no harm, not actually jeopardizing the actual witnesses, but sometimes we collect a certain information and we create a mainstream story that certain people started not to tell their own story. They start to tell the story that they heard from the media. And this is something very dangerous, because in pattern analysis, it can be wasting so much resources to know that then the 1, 2, 3 happened. We can give example on that, but I don't want to take time from my other colleagues.
Actually, I want to take it to Leila, because there is a connection here. You mentioned, Leila, in your when you were talking, that there is some footage that you don't use because it's out of respect to the victims, etc. Do you document and you keep that kind of information on the side for the use later for litigation? And do you have the framework to take this to court later, or is it something like you wait for it to happen by other organizations?
Good question. So we did use it. We just blurred the bodies. And then in our new episode about the shooting of children, we actually did use graphic images, and we explained to the viewer at the beginning of the film, before it even started, why we chose to, which is that people need to see what people are going through every single day. So it's a very tough decision. We have a lot of different conversations about it ethically, in terms of trauma and traumatizing the audience and all of that. But as far as we as journalists don't take the efforts to actually, prosecute cases, but we have been approached by lawyers who do prosecute cases for more information, details, videos, that kind of thing.
Hadi, I will take it to you with a quick question. You have done a bit of that. We know from our own investigative work, sometimes streamlining the relationship between the journalists, advocates, lawyers, etc., make sure that accountability, the process, which usually takes a very long time, still takes a long time, but it's a bit faster. How's your assessment right now, given the amount of atrocities and war crimes happening everywhere, starting especially with Gaza, but also with all the crimes uncovered in Syria now? How would you assess the situation?
The biggest challenge for us right now, Alia, is the question when it comes to resources. There are many groups doing amazing work when it comes to journalism, documentation, and legal work, but how can these groups survive with limited resources? This is really difficult right now in many different contexts we are working with, from the situation in Sudan, which organizations, many of them were dependent a lot on US government funding into, like different countries. So I see that this is going to be really turning into a bigger problem in the future, where we have very limited resources to deal with mass amount of crimes and violations that unfortunately some of them won't be documented, and this is really dangerous for any kind of justice and sustainable peace, including in the situation in Syria, where we had many groups doing documentation work and journalism work from 2011, builds amazing skills along these years and really good capacity. But right now we are in a situation where most of these organizations are not able to do the work, neither in Syria or outside of Syria because of the limited resources and capacity. So that's one of the challenges, which leads us into what could be potential situation here is more collaborative work between different sectors and between different groups, between journalists and lawyers and the legal community, and having the workflows and the technical infrastructure there to allow for these collaborations. Because there are still some possibilities that are there for legal accountability, even small possibilities, but those possibilities, we need to take them really seriously because they can really open up a bigger path to justice and accountability. So it's a very challenging situation, Alia, really. This situation right now is not easy for any of us.
We could talk a lot about this, but I'm seeing we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to take it to Joanna DeMarco, who will be helping us moderate the question. Joanna?
Hi. Thanks a lot for your presentations. Yes, we've got a lot of questions. So I'll get started. The first one's for Laila. What safety measures should be taken in unstable regions where terrorist militias are active?
I don't have personal experience working in regions where those kinds of groups are active. I can speak more about the Gaza context. I don't know if Hadi or Raji have more experience in those regions, but I think, general advice would be obviously, keep your devices, exercise digital security, use certain apps that are more secure. Don't stand out anywhere you go. Be culturally aware. I think this is advice that can really apply anywhere you go in the world. It's usually not a good idea to just parachute into a region in which you know nothing about the region, which unfortunately journalists do all too often. And of course, work with trusted people on the ground, people who are very experienced in that kind of reporting, who can navigate that environment, who can assess risks. There's nothing more important than working with locals who actually know what they're doing and who are experienced.
Do you have anything else to add, Hadi or Raji?
I can add something very small. Basically, because I work with teams that they have to be actually embedded in these communities in a ways that they are from the community. And sometimes we have to bring someone or very specific experts from outside the communities to be there to do a training or to collect certain evidence, like a physical evidence, for example, and you need a certain expertise. Maybe it's part of an NBC, nuclear, chemical, or biological hazards. So you need this expert to be there. So before they go there, we make sure that they have, we call it the politics of understandings. And one of them, when you are dealing with human beings, you cannot photo or you cannot video them as you do with an ammunition. You cannot put your camera on top of them, for example. You cannot do it in this way, even though we would ask them to do these things. Some of them is when we have forensic anthropologists opening a certain grave, for example. So basically, the way that they have to do it, it has to be respectful. The way that they even photograph certain things, especially in the Middle East, when it comes to women or children, corpses, like we make sure that there's a long list that we learned from other conflict, for example, in ex-Yugoslavia and these things. And the most important something is you shouldn't go there to see something that you think you know. You should go there to see something that you will know. And this is big difference, because biasing is enemy number one of the good intentions that ruin every litigation or any whatsoever process I was part in.
Quickly to add to that from the open source perspective, those groups, those militia groups, if they are operating, for example, we worked on some of them that were operating in Syria, whether they were former Syrian governments or other type of militias. They promote their work online. They promote their work on social media. They have their personnel have accounts on social media. So it's really important to make sure that we identify these sources of information, whether it's individuals or whether it's pages that are supporting these groups or pages created with the name of these groups. Collecting and archiving them is really important, and then doing verification as we do verification with any piece of audiovisual content, is verifying the date, location, time, linking these militia groups to a certain incidents. So this is how we do it from the open source methodology perspective.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Raji. How do you ensure that individuals providing testimony are fully informed about the use and potential risks of their statements?
Thank you for the question. It starts with the making sure that they, when they decide, after building the trust, moving from being a lead that is telling us as an entity like Reckoning Project, Syrian Legal Center, whatever, about a crime, to be a witness, we have something called the consent form. And the consent form, step by step, elaborate exactly what we will do, what we are trying to collect, what will happen to them, and we also give no promises. The only promise we give is we will preserve their access to justice, and the part of the consent, there is also a risk for them because we ask them to have a legal personality. That means they have to bring their passport, a document that say who they are. And this is also another challenge because so many people you deal with, they don't have these documents because they are refugees or they are illegal now, illicit. I don't like to use the word illegal migrant, but illicit migrants in a different country. And here we have to make sure that when they are consenting by giving us their name and their testimony, they are also legally protected. Because by mentioning that point, they are legally criminalizing themselves. Sometimes people will tell you stuff that can be legally criminalizing. So all of this is mentioned in the consent letter. And we also do a long list of something called risk analysis, because risk analysis goes for them and their families, because we are talking about war criminals, warlords, and people who did crime against the humanity. This is how dangerous is these people.
Okay, thanks, Raji. Laila, the next question's for you. How can journalists tackle the right of reply for a documentary when it comes to reporting on war and killing?
Good question. This is something we deal with every documentary we work on, whether it's about war and killing or a private equity company squeezing hospitals' resources and putting patients' lives at risk. So I would say, of course, with every piece of journalism you do, you have to make sure that the entity you're accusing has the right to respond to all of the allegations. In the case of the Israeli military, we request sit-down interviews. They decline them. We send detailed lists of questions with all of our allegations. They don't respond. So we simply just include the fact that they don't respond in the film, whether it's in voiceover or at the very end in a slate. And, even if they continue to shut out certain media organizations, in the case of Al Jazeera, they've raided our offices in the West Bank and Jerusalem. They've actually forcibly shut down the networks, refused to let them operate. The same more recently with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. But we have to keep moving. We have to keep reporting. We have to keep exposing these atrocities, reporting on them, and giving them the opportunity to tell their side, but they generally are not interested in doing so.
Okay, thanks. Hadi, what ethical guidelines govern the storage and sharing of collected evidence to prevent misuse or unauthorized access?
Thank you for the question. We share information with accountability mechanisms, with the war crime units that are prosecuting perpetrators of international crimes. We share this information with also academia, with other institutions, fact-finding missions, with civil society organizations, vetted civil society organizations and groups. So we have developed a policy who we can share information from and who we don't share information from. That's that policy. We make sure that information is not shared to any party that could be putting sources or anything related to the incidents under risk. So in certain instances, we might not share with the academic institution materials that we've shared with a legal institution because it might really jeopardize the legal case that we are working on. When it comes to storage, it's really important to make sure that we are complying with the local laws of where we are as an organization, nonprofit based in Berlin. So we are adhering to German law when it comes to data privacy and when it comes to GDPR. So anything related to data privacy and security. And we ensure that by making sure that we have consultation with lawyers to let us know what information we can store, for how long we are able to store it, or can we store it for a longer period, and why we need to store it for a longer period. And when this information needs to be removed. So we make sure, for example, if we get requests from any source of information to remove content from online for any specific reason related to their privacy, security, or just because they don't want this information to be online, so we take it from the online archive or the Syrian archive website, for example, offline. Most of the information that we store it and it's confidential. It's not published. So that's also very important to mention. We focus on publishing very small part of it. Storing information, we need to make sure that the storage is secure, making sure that we have a security audit to the storage. So it's not easy to really compromise it. And the other thing is to make sure that we have different backups of the storage in different locations. So just in case of an incident happen to a storage in one location, then we have other location too. One of the issues related to collection on storage that is really important to mention is we, as an organization, we limit ourselves as well from a point of view of we are not able to collect everything. So, for example, private content that is published on private groups, whether it's on Facebook or WhatsApp or Telegram, it's something that we can't collect. Otherwise, we will be violating the local laws. So in this case, it might be really relevant content for a certain investigation we are working on, but we are not able to archive it. Because otherwise you would violate the law by that. You're compromising the whole case you are working on. So these limitations can be frustrating, but it's really important that they are clear to the team and that they are clear in a policy and that the team knows what to collect and what not to collect, and look into different solutions of workarounds that make sense to the team and that also are legally sound in order not to affect any case you are working on. So these are some considerations related to storage and sharing of information.
Okay, thank you. I actually have another question for you that's about the technical aspect as well. How do you handle potential evidence that may have been manipulated or that lacks metadata?
That's a really good question. When we archive any piece of information, it's a video, photo, we need to make sure that it's relevant. We need to make sure that it's kind of also really relevant to the contexts of the case that we are working on. And we are able to do that in multiple ways. One of the ways that we are able to do that very easily is because we are archiving this content, for example, about specific case from multiple sources. So in this case, we're able to corroborate the same content from multiple sources, maybe video from specific angles, witness testimonies by different media agencies that did the interview for a specific person. So that's one of them. The second one is we collaborate with other organizations that they collect witness testimonies, that they work on documents. Corroboration with that also is very important. What I mean by that is if the media is edited, it is edited. If it's manipulated, it's manipulated. Sometimes it's actually a really good evidence that media is manipulated for a certain reason in the case. So we keep this record of the material archived. We make sure that there are notes, that this material is edited. It's could be manipulated for these specific reasons, and through corroboration with other partners, we're able to come to a certain conclusion, whether it's relevant for the case or not. We don't exclude it immediately just because it's edited or manipulated, if this answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we'll have time for maybe one more question. So Laila, this one's for you. So all stories in Gaza are important. How are the stories important and publication priorities determined?
It's a very good question. How do you prioritize which stories to tell? I think generally we try to find examples that are representative of a larger trend. So in the case of every single one of the horrific cases that we covered in The Night Won't End and some of the other documentaries, they're representative of something else. So whether it's the airstrike, the execution, Hind Rajab is civilians fleeing for safety and being attacked, and the fact that there's nowhere safe, or another case we covered of Abdullah al-Ghath and his family who followed the Israeli orders to move to the south, went to a so-called safe zone, and their family was attacked anyway, so only to find out there are no real safe zones. So whatever it is, it should be ideally representative of a larger trend, and I think tells a larger story. But it is extremely important to humanize, to provide that detail, that humanity that's so lacking in so much of the media coverage, which is so clinical, so cold, so detached, and to really approach it from that perspective of how can we give the viewer just a very human, very real picture of what's happening so that they're able to put themselves in that family situation.
Okay, thanks. And we actually have one more for Raji, but I'm not sure if he's here. Seems to have gone offline. Yeah. Okay. So Alia, over to you. You're muted.
We have a couple of minutes before we have to close. Any last words from you, Hadi and Leila?
I mean, last words.
In a minute,
I think,
Hadi.
yeah. So very, very quickly, I really think that This work is still really important, even with all the challenges and difficulties that we are facing. It's really important to continue, and it's really important that we have some sort of solidarity with each other and collaboration more in order to sustain our efforts to document these crimes, even in these difficult situations. If you would like to reach out to Mnemonic to collaborate together, please connect with me at hadi@mnemonic.org. Or through our website, mnemonic.org. And thank you so much, Alia and Leila, Raji, Joanna, for the panel today.
Thank you, Hadi. Leila?
Thank you so much again, Alia, and the Global Investigative Journalist Network, all of you, for being here. I just want to conclude by echoing what Hadi said. This is very important work, critical work, expensive work. Please, continue pursuing it if you're a journalist. Please support organizations that do this kind of work, whether it's by sharing the work, hosting screenings if it's a documentary, or contributing your funds if it's a nonprofit that's in need of support. It's just important that we really shine a light on these war crimes and these atrocities, because otherwise they will continue if they happen in the dark.
Well, I wanna add my voice to yours. This is just an opportunity to close by sending a shout out to everyone who's working so hard, whether on the front lines or during every part of the process, to make sure that the crimes are documented, that justice, even if it takes a long time, accountability is not just an empty word, that the criminals eventually pay for the crimes they're committing. And unfortunately, we run out of time. So before I close, I just want to thank the Global Investigative Journalism Network for this opportunity today. And I want to thank everyone on the audience for joining us. And of course, I want to thank you, the speakers, Raji, Hadi, and Leila. It's a great pleasure talking to you. And best of luck with all the great work that you're all doing.